Lara Williams. I'm back. This is Sonographers After Dark. I'm joined by Daniel Bourque. Daniel, welcome. How are you?
Thanks. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Good. So I'm glad you're here. You and I met not too long ago at the ASE this past scientific sessions.
That's right. Yeah, back in September in Nashville.
Yep. And I don't know how we didn't ever meet before that. That's kind of crazy to me, but
I was wondering the same thing, especially with all the different connections that we had before that. I was kind of surprised myself. I was like, geez, I don't know how we had never connected before. So glad we were able to do it then.
Who knows? Yeah. I've actually, so many, many, many years ago, I actually scanned in the facility that you're at. So I worked for a company initially, and then I had my own company that did staffing. And so we would actually staff like Dr. Phillips Hospital and a couple other places locally in Central Florida. So yeah,
Oh,
I'm really
fantastic.
surprised we never crossed our paths. So
Yeah.
that's how it goes.
Echoes a small world, as they say, but eventually
It
it comes together.
is. It's definitely a small world. So, especially where you're at down by Disney, everything's a small world.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Makes me want to sing It's a Small World After All every time.
No
We put
kidding.
pieces together in Echo, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I know her and I know him. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, so I know you've got a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a few things.
A
New
few.
program. We've got a lot of the clinical stuff that I'm doing. So the program, we're actually getting ready to start taking applications for the second year. So it was a 5-year odyssey to get this thing off the ground, and it's been I don't want to do anything else. I wouldn't want to do anything else. It's been even more rewarding than I thought it would be.
That's
I got a
awesome.
group of about 6 people, and it's been fantastic. And Orlando Health has been amazing in getting this started. And I've got, it's when you have leadership that's in place that is willing to kind of work with you and help you out. My leader, Amber Nibbling, has been fantastic. Just all kinds of good things. And when you take a long time to put something together, you are essentially you're banging your head against the wall for a long period of time.
Great.
And you get frustrated because it takes so long, but then the end product ends up, everything went off without a hitch, everything the way that I laid it out. And it could only have happened if it took that long to materialize. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Thank you to the state of Florida for their lengthy process. Is that what I'm
Yeah,
hearing?
I will say that the Independent Education Commission for the state of Florida is extremely thorough. I
Good thing.
appreciate I appreciate what they're doing because they're trying to get rid of a lot of people that rob people essentially of education. They non accredited, just kind of fly by night organizations. They've really kind of cracked down on that. So I understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And when you do that, you can at least you can kind of get through. But at the same time, it takes a while. But
Yeah.
nothing government oriented is fast.
And nothing worth having is ever going to be done overnight, right? I mean, that's the
No,
truth. So, yeah.
no, that's what I tell my students a lot, and I've talked to many people that nothing good comes easy.
No, not at all, for sure.
No.
So, yeah, I was looking at the time that you and I spoke, I was actually looking at what it would take to maybe start an echo program in Florida and what that would look like. And so thank you for giving me some in-depth clarity on what that track would look like. And that helped me make some decisions for some other things. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad I can help people out with that because not knowing what I went into, I would have liked to have been at least somewhat prepared. But when we looked at the application, I initially had, matter of fact, I'm sitting in the office that I used to work in right now, and I had a whiteboard, and it looked like a beautiful mind. Like when you had all the stuff on the window, like that's what the blueprint looked like for all the things that I needed to get when we got started, and it ended up being actually more. It was like almost a 300-page document that we had to submit once we had everything
Yeah.
together. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's
thorough.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm in Ohio now, but I lived most of my life. I lived in Florida in the Orlando area. So, I actually operated a independent diagnostic testing facility in Florida. So even in that regard, the state is very, like you said, very thorough, very comprehensive. I
Hmm.
had to submit
Hmm.
so much documentation to get that status
Hmm.
through basically an ACA license with the state of Florida as well. So it's probably a whole different animal than what you did, but it's definitely got some similarities, I think. So yeah,
Yeah.
it can be a process dealing with governmental oversight. But I think, like you said, especially in Florida, there were some shady schools out there that closed their doors, like no contact, no updates,
Hmm.
nothing, and people lost all their money and got no education at all. I remember that happening in the state of Florida. So I can understand why they are very strict on what they do.
Well, one of the things that you have to do as part of these programs is on a yearly basis, you get an initial license to operate, and then you get an annual license. And every year that you get up for that renewal, you have to go in front of a board. And it's a panel of about 6 people, and you have to go up and you have to essentially, explain your program. They'll ask you questions about certain things. And I cannot tell you how many people didn't show up for that hearing and how
Wow.
cross the panel was about how like we're going to have to start making this like there was like a whole argument discussion like by the panel because they were angry about the people that didn't actually show up for their hearings, and they're talking about revoking licenses for people that wouldn't show up because their whole point is that the seriousness of this, we want to make a connection with you in person. And I could also appreciate that because they want to lay face to the people that are actually trying to teach and educate people. And I applaud them for it because the people that are running the people that are running the panel, I've had a chance to meet them, and they're impressive and they're good people.
Yeah. Nice. So, with all of the challenges that you experienced getting it open, obviously, then you have I mean, you opened not that long ago, right? I mean, this was just
August,
around the
yeah,
ASE time. I was going to say, I thought it was close to August or September of last year. So you
yeah.
are in the trenches at the moment, just kind of figuring out that first cohort of students, right? Yeah.
The learning part. So I got to say that I've had amazing people like I know you had Richie Palma on this podcast.
I did. Yeah.
Between him and Steve Walling, Brad Roberts, there have been so many people that I've had, Jeff Hill, that have been huge helps to me to get this thing off the ground. And Steve Walling was one of the guys that I had kind of done a ton of collaboration with. Um, like when you have problems going through stuff, you needed people to talk to. I could call any of those guys up and say, hey, listen, are you sure that we 4 days a week of scanning, like they're in the clip. Like, is this going to be like? And I went through this program, and I'm asking them
Yeah.
these questions, and it's been amazing to see. Like after the 5 weeks, all of the you had tears the first week. You had people coming to you like questioning their life decisions and life choices, and I have to be the person to like pull them back off the ledge, like Holden
Hmm.
Caulfield, Catcher in the Rye. Like you're trying to keep these kids, you're pulling them back. So listen,
Yeah.
we got this. I'm behind you. It's going to get better. So it's kind of gone like this, right? Initially, they crash because it's been information overload, but then
Yeah.
they start to put things together and they get their hand on the probe, and it's been like this. It's been
Yeah.
the amount of growth that I've seen in the last month is beyond what I could have absolutely expected, and it's been a method that's worked. I mean, I saw it with myself. I saw it with Richie Palmer's program. Just you forget, and I have been blown away. And these people, like the grins and the confidence that they come in with now, because of how hard
Hmm.
it was in the beginning and what they've overcome, it's been
Yeah.
truly the most rewarding thing you could have.
Yeah. And to know that your influence in that is, giving someone the ability to then translate that to their patients, right? Because ultimately, that's why we're all here.
100%.
So, you know, so then, you're making decision makers and critical thinkers in while they're scanning. And that, I think there are some programs that don't really do that, you know?
And and that's what's nice about the hospital-based programs, and that's why I think I gravitated more towards that because what you're able to do, and the slight difference is that I still try to keep a clinical footprint. And I think that's what's nice about, like, I still come to the hospital once a week and actually twice a
Hmm.
week because I scan with the students on Fridays, and Tuesdays I come in and just do my own. So I'll do my own outpatients, or I'll go to the ICU and I'll scan. So you still have that opportunity to stay relevant, current, and that gives you
Yeah.
credibility. And you can actually, but when you go to teach, you can say, this is what the real world actually looks like. I tell the
Hmm.
students there's the guideline answers, and then there's the real world answers. And of course, there's the way that it,
Yeah.
is absolutely what they say should be done, and this
Yeah.
is what might actually end up happening. So they're prepared,
Hmm.
right? They know both ends of the spectrum, and they're not surprised. Like when I walked out of echo school, that was the one thing I was the most impressed with, and what I wanted to make sure that I convey to the students. I felt like I could go to any lab and at least do their protocol and be able to like assimilate myself in a reasonable amount of time. Like sure, it would be tough and overwhelming, but it was not something that I wasn't able to do. Like I've never had that level of confidence in anything that I've ever done in my life. I've never had that level of confidence in anything that I've ever done in my life. And that's what that type of a program did. And that's what I'm trying to instill in our students. And what, Richie I was so fortunate to have him because there was no place I couldn't go.
Yeah.
And I've tried to bring that same kind of aspect to the students, and it resonates when you're the one up there talking.
Yeah,
So
and I'm sure with your students as well, when they're the ones, having to then take what you're telling them and putting it into practice. So, and
100%.
then now that you can actually see the light bulb has gone off, right?
Literally.
So there's that frustrating period where they're just not catching it, you know. But when that light bulb finally goes off and you can really see the results of that, influenced in what they're thinking and what they're saying, what they're doing in their scans, that
Hmm.
that matters. So how when you put your program together, obviously you had 5 years to plan, but
Yeah.
so when did you start that recruiting for actually bringing students in, and how did that look?
So there were some limitations with the floor. That was part of what kind of hamstrung us a little bit because you couldn't really talk about the program. That was one of the stipulations, is that until you got that initial approval, you couldn't even advertise. So the nice thing about Orlando Health is that we were a big internal organization. So what they decided to do was we have like 30,000 employees or something along those lines. It's like maybe even 40 now. So there's a lot of internal aspect that they could get. So anybody that had employment status was granted essentially a scholarship. So if you fit the qualifications, so we said, associates minimum, bachelor's preferred, allied health field was kind of what we were looking for. You had to have at least anatomy and physiology, 1 and 2, medical terminology. After that, it was whoever we could get. We ended up getting 40 applicants for the first program without any external
Internally.
advertising. Internally,
Wow,
I
that's
had
crazy.
two people external. Exactly. I had two people external apply. I took one external candidate and the other five were internal. So the five internal candidates qualified for the scholarship. So it was free, which
Okay.
was even more amazing for
Yeah.
them. And so as far as I got lucky because I was behind a big organization. Things like LinkedIn were helpful. I think if had I been a small organization, it would have been better. Like this year, word of mouth is kind of traveling, and that's what a lot of these hospital programs end up being is good word of mouth and interconnection. Like, one school, you may apply to one school if one other program director for a similar program. Hey, I got a guy that's over here. So it becomes a network, like much
Yeah.
like Echo is. And that's so if I ever have students that I think would be better suited coming from a different region, like, hey, did you look at this program? The same thing kind of happens once you start to tie yourself in.
Yeah.
So that part has been amazing to do. But Orlando Health has got a good footprint. They worked with me. We had flyers that came out. We had a website, so we had to kind of develop all that stuff. And that was the first time I had ever done anything like that. So I had a lot of help in that realm.
That's awesome. So, I was talking with Amy Dillenbach too about her program, right, up in
Sure.
Cleveland Clinic, and so, and
Yep.
I know she had a lot of help from Richie putting that together as well. And
Hmm.
so, we were talking about how, obviously the goal is to really have retention, to have your own kind of pipeline of sonographers. I mean, that's ultimately the goal
Hmm.
of a hospital-based program, right?
Yep.
So, I would imagine it would be sometimes maybe challenging to I know for her she's in Cleveland, so to have someone who wants to come and stay in Cleveland is probably more challenging for her than to have people who want to come and stay in Orlando, right? I mean, that's the reality. Yeah,
So Amy does have the nice thing about what Amy has is she has the prestigious nature of the Cleveland Clinic. I mean, that is a name that
absolutely.
carries its own weight, regardless of whether you want to be in Cleveland or not. That is a very prestigious organization. Orlando Health is up and coming. Obviously, we have the weather and everything
Mhm.
else behind it.
Yeah.
One of the goal. So that the nice thing about what the organization did was I always wanted to go through and make this as an accredited program, credential granted program. Initially, some programs you can do just internal and they can kind of sit for the boards. You don't necessarily have to go through the state of Florida stuff, but I wanted to offer it to everybody because, when you start bringing people in from other areas and other states, you get different opinions, different ideas, different ways of kind of doing things, and you bring different influences in. So that's what I wanted to do that from the beginning. And I know Amy has done the same thing in Cleveland,
Mhm.
but the goal is obviously, like you said, retention. But it's our job to not require them to stay. So those employees that decide that they're going to do it and switch over from their position in Orlando Health to go to the school, they're not required to stay. If they
Wow.
decide that tomorrow they want to go to when they're done, if they want to go to the Cleveland Clinic, they want to go, we can go wherever they want. Yeah,
That's surprising.
it's our job. I said this
Mm.
from the jump, and I said that the state of Florida was actually very happy to hear it. It's our job to make it an environment they want to stay in. It's
Right.
not. I'm not trying to create servitude. My
Yeah.
job is to say, hey, this is a great place to work. I am behind this. We're going to give you all the resources. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. If it's a great place that you want to stay, fantastic. I applaud Orlando Health for that.
Yeah.
Because it just their employee backing. That is definitely the best thing about this organization is the working environment and what they've tried to do in trying to create a culture of wanting to come to work, not having to come to work. And that's I've been very grateful for that because they've definitely had that impact on me in terms of how I've conveyed this to the students. Like, hey, if this isn't a spot that you want to be, guess what? You can go somewhere else, and you have that ability because if you give people the choice,
Hmm.
they're probably going to stay if it's a halfway decent place anyway. It's not
Right.
required, so that
Yeah.
I prefer that.
I'm very surprised by that because most of the time, if you have an employer-backed program that they're paying for the training, they want at least 2 years out of that, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm,
that's usually what you find. So, very
mm-hmm,
surprised to hear that. But I think you're right. It does actually give them freedom of choice, right?
mm-hmm,
And so then they're not feeling like they're a slave to the organization, like you said, servitude that's
100%.
required. So, yeah, that's very surprising to me.
Yeah,
Um,
there's not
so
many that do it, like you said. That's not the trend.
No, not at all. So how did you select your students? How did that go?
That went better than I thought. It's your the interview process. We had a I had a kind of a scoring sheet that took in, and actually I credit Brett Roberts with this. He had a whole algorithm that he had come up with. So we look
Nice.
at, we look at their academic record, what their GPA was. That's part of it. But then we also looked at experience in healthcare. So even if what area of healthcare were you in? It doesn't have obviously nobody comes in with echo experience, right? Nobody comes in with
Right.
you may come in with ultrasound experience, but what I looked at was, uh, you know, were you in another area of healthcare? Because you can get insights from that you could bring into the clinical practice of echo. Um, what degree level that you obtained. So we had some people with master's degree. I had two foreign physicians that applied. I had one of them get in. She's doing extremely well. So there was a lot of things in the interview. So there's a pretty extensive interview that we do. We had a panel this year. I'm looking forward to having the students be part of the interview panel. So they'll have like a separate set of interviews where the students actually get to kind of bounce questions and they get to actually ask a lot of questions of the students to kind of get more of the inner workings of the program. So the interview process, I felt like sealed the deal. One of the candidates I had, applied. It was the last person I granted an interview to. And she, had decent enough grades, but when she got to the interview, she absolutely crushed the interview. It was the first one that I interviewed, and she was at the bottom of the pile, but she worked her way up to almost to the top just by the interview. So you have to have both. And
Yeah.
I felt like that was very, very important to not just look at the grades. And some of these people like had applied to multiple programs and they couldn't get into the door because their math was like, they got a 2.9 in their algebra. It was like that disqualified them. I didn't have to have that because I don't have this giant pool. I don't have faceless applicants. I could basically kind of say, well, is this somebody that I could really take a chance on based on
Hmm.
what they said in their essay, what their letters of recommendation show. There's little things you can tease from letters of recommendation. Like they're all very generic. They're AI written, but it's what they say and how strongly
Chat
they recommend.
GPT.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. But if you get
How do
people that
you
are
as a
saying,
that's another question I'll ask you in a minute.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
exactly,
Keep going.
and how you write that letter of recommendation, you can pull things out. Yeah, they're all very generic, but there were little things that you can tease out from that. So we did all of that. So it was very extensive. It took a long time, but I got a class of 6. And then once you get the class together, you then have to figure out how well these people are going to work with each other because it's a small class. So
Yeah.
you're essentially building a team. And I felt like I wouldn't have done it any different with what we had from this first class. And we'll go through the process the exact same way, because as much as me teaching them, the learning environment helps them to learn as well. They're all together, right? During class, they're all in, they're talking to each other, they're talking to each other offline, they're meeting up after the fact. So you create that relationship that they have, and that helps the learning, and that makes it a better environment too.
Yeah. And obviously there's some heavy burden that falls to your sonographers, right? Within
Mhm.
the organization because they're doing a bulk of training as well. So how does that go over? How do you, influence them to be, positive contributors to the process?
So you have to have buy-in, and I think anybody that does the hospital-based stuff, you have to have credibility to some extent within the organization, right? Amy had a lot of credibility there when she started in Cleveland. Steve in Connecticut had his Richie when he came to Duke. He already had credibility from a national standpoint. So you have to have a certain level of credibility in the buy-in, and then you have to actually go to the sonographers and identify those that you're going to use as your clinical instructors. You have to meet with them. I did this 6 months before the program started. I said, this is what we're doing. I went and met with every single site that I was anticipating using. I sat down with every one of them for an hour or two and said, this is what we're doing. What do you think? I went and asked them for ideas and input to have them, again, have them feel like they had a stake in this. And then the actual application of everything. So there's still hiccups and bumps that still occur even after you've met with them, even after you've done all of those things. And you have to be able to adjust, and you have to have backup plan for your backup plan. And clinical sites are the hardest thing to get. People that are willing to do this multiple days a week, for it's 46 weeks of training, 4 days a week. So you're not using the same person every single day, but it's a lot. You have to treat them well. You have to be, you have to be attentive to what they need. You have to check in with the clinical instructors. We try to give them as much as we can. There's not a lot of compensation extra. We had kind of tried to go down that road, but we're trying to do things like, an ASE membership, CMEs. We're trying to do as much of that stuff as we can to kind of alleviate that. But and just honestly, just being present and thanking them profusely, showing how much you appreciate them is one of the easiest things to do, but it's the thing that often gets overlooked. Like just saying, hey, thanks for doing such a freaking amazing job getting these people, because what I do is half of the job. And I argue it's even 60-40, 60 on the clinical side, 40 on my side.
Yeah, because you're shipping them off after
100%.
your first few weeks, right? That's how Richie, I think, said he runs his program is 4 weeks or five
Week
weeks.
six, week six, they're
Week
scanning.
six.
And that's what
Okay.
we did.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So you're getting, so there,
Mhm.
we do clinical labs beforehand. So they all go into the field being able to get all the two-dimensional views. So that was one of the things that we kind of checked off. So you can get all of the basic two-dimensional views, but you're still putting together what's an optimal view to get color. You're still working your way
Yeah.
through
The whole
apical. Yeah.
picture.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
still spinning. There's still a lot of other stuff, but
Yep.
it, what I find is that the immersion, and this was something that, and I know Rich even said it on your podcast, it's the full immersion, and the amount of scan time you get directly correlates to the product. But I could not, I mean, they're getting well over 1,500 hours by the time it's done, 13 to 1,500 hours of scan time. That's a ton. It's 30 hours a week. So it works.
Yeah, and that's more than some traditional 2-year associate degree level programs. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't remember, I went to school for general ultrasound, so I actually learned echo on the job about
Mm-hmm.
20 plus years ago. So, and so with that, as far as the general, I don't remember how many clinical hours. It was not much over 1,000 that we had to do. I think we were only doing clinicals 2 or 3 days a week,
Yeah.
in the beginning, maybe towards the end, we ramped that up a little bit. So on the general side, on echo, I think they might have done one extra day. But yeah, I mean, you're definitely beating out a lot of programs as far as scan time that, are associate degree level programs. So,
It,
but
and the
yours is a
thing,
certificate, right?
certificate, yeah, correct. And the thing with the scan time too is it's not, there's a scan time number that's optimal to get, which that you could look at different. There's not many publications that say this is the correct amount of scan time, especially for certificates. But when you look at how it's pieced together, and it's the consistency, right? Because you remember when you first got started, and I had one of the students that was saying this, like they came back from a week and a half break after Christmas, and she was like, "Man, the first two echoes today were tough because you don't have that skill ingrained,
The
right? You
muscle
can't go away from
memory.
the pro." And
Yeah.
when you only are scanning 2 days a week, even though you may be over those 2 years acquiring 13 or 1400 hours, it's how consistently in a row that you're doing to build, because it's a muscle memory pattern. It's a skill,
It is.
and you have to practice it consistently without interruption. That's the biggest thing, and that's why I think this works better that way.
Yeah, agreed for sure. Yeah. I having learned Echo on the job, I learned it immersively very much by someone who had a master's in education and taught me one-on-one. So I
Yeah.
was able to really kind of dive in, and I was scanning every day as I was learning. And so, I think that that helped me for
Yeah.
sure, so and then she would throw didactic at me every evening. So I was going home and studying, and it was fun.
That's
you know.
awesome.
So yeah, no, it was great. I thank God for her every day. So yeah, but back to just kind of the whole process, right? So now you are when do you graduate your students?
It'll be August 5th is our graduation date.
Okay. And so then you'll start another cohort the same time, like
Like
right that same
two
week?
weeks, about 2 weeks
No
after.
break,
Yes,
huh? No
two
rest for the
weeks.
weary?
We get a little bit of a respite. It'll be about 2 weeks break, and then we're right
Yeah,
back into it. Yeah, a little
right
bit of time.
back into it again. Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and then what does that look like as far as placement? Have you already, and I mean, maybe, I don't know if you're at liberty to disclose that, but as far as offering them positions, right? Because the goal would be that they would stay and that they would, be employees of Orlando Health, right?
That's the goal. So there are positions that are open. I think what's happening right now is everybody's kind of, because it's still a new program and they're still rotating through many of the sites. There's definitely the interest level is peaked. I've had a couple of people that have kind of talked to me and saying, hey, when your students graduated, I have pediatrics, which is another, we have Arnold Palmer Hospital, which is a very big pediatric area. So they're very interested as well. We're exploring some opportunities for the students to maybe, a couple people transition maybe into pediatrics because there's a big need.
Yeah.
So I think from a placement standpoint, it won't be difficult. It's still like, again, I look at the time, we are only 6 months in, but we're already 6 months in, which is the part that,
Yeah.
still kind of blows me away. So it's coming up pretty quick. Um, but the field, right? It's not going to be too hard to get positions. It's just a matter of where they're going to want to go. And so we'll
Right.
start probably that process more thoroughly, probably like March, April. I think we'll probably start seeing people that may want to transition here. Like they're starting to get ideas of where they want to go. The bare fact that was a very organic discussion amongst the group today. Like talking about, hey, have you heard about this site? And what do you think about here? And this one pays this much. And so they're starting to talk about that, which is good. But
Yeah.
it's an organic conversation, which is nice.
Yeah, not something that's like forced and put out there quite yet. So, as far as your pediatric, is that something that you would be teaching your current cohort or teaching other, adult echocardiographers within the lab and doing a crossover? I'm just curious how that would work.
So what they're looking to do right now is they're looking to try to maybe set up something where it'll be kind of like a postgraduate, and it's very similar. I think Richie's program in Connecticut, it kind of started something where it's once you get your adult side, if it's something that you want to transition to, you have the opportunity to do that while you're still kind of new in the field, and then you're taking basically the adult credential, you're working your way into peds. And this is for people that know exactly what they want to do right away. So some people start in adults and they say, well, I think I might want to go to peds. Some people like say, hey, I want to learn adults, and then I definitely want to go to peds. And I have probably two people I would say that really want to do peds. There's a huge need for it on our side, so they're going to try to slowly, I think, transition to this as we get to the graduation. They'll get a little bit of exposure to it beforehand, but then it'll probably be a full immersion where they may. I could anticipate maybe having them, kind of work with the work towards the credential on the job kind of stuff. Because
Yeah.
they'd be willing to do that. They have an amazing educator over there
Yeah.
who does fantastic things, and they take adults on a regular basis. The problem is that keeping them because they end up going other places. So we're hoping
Right.
for some
And there's such a
maintainment there.
need. for pediatric and fetal echo across the board nationwide, everyone that I talk to, which is why I actually started a cross training program for pediatric echo. So doing it's 12 weeks, it's just didactic with a little bit of intro to hands-on, not clinical, it's
Hmm.
not a degree based, it's simply a course, but it
Yep.
just kind of helps to bridge the gap between someone who has only had adult training and get them just kind of understanding so that when they are cross training with someone who's, meeting them every day in that clinical space, they have some further understanding that, groundwork that's laid. So that's something that will start off in June for me.
And my
That I'm
goal
off.
is to get the credential, like to get pediatrically certified, so that I can do more of the didactic to kind of maybe add this on. Like initially, we
Yeah.
getting the adult stuff kind of situated, getting at least a year or two before we start adding other related programs. But that is probably one of the areas I could see us adding
Yeah.
something on, and then how it organically expands based on where the need is, right? So vascular, is there a need there? Will we do something? Maybe you get pediatrics, yes. I mean, so there's different spots.
Yeah, that cross training component is kind of where I'm falling in at the moment, where I don't have a full blown echo or ultrasound school yet. Um, just leave
Yeah,
that there
there you
yet.
go.
And but I'm kind of doing that bridge program. So that's where I'm falling as far as the education that I'm offering at the moment.
Sure.
So which is a whole different animal than what you're doing, obviously, So
No, but it's
because
great
you
that
can
there's a
never
need to fill a
learn
gap.
yeah, you can never learn everything you need to know about echo or pediatric echo in 12 weeks. That's just the reality, right?
No.
But, getting the basics down is helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, because everyone I talk to across the board, I was having a conversation with Anita Moongrady out of UCSF and then also Kelly Thorson, who is now at UCSF, and I didn't know that. I thought he was still at Lucille Children's. So we were talking about just kind of their need for, getting people in their lab and how they do training for fetal echo as well, right? So, it's just kind of this whole, I think, post-COVID life, right? And the post-COVID era of healthcare has led to so many just staffing shortages across the board in echo that I think, programs like yours are coming up to fill the need to
Mhm.
have that pipeline of sonographers that can be, have the retention there, and we're just having to kind of think differently about how we train people, how we do education, I think. Is that something that you've seen?
It is, and I look at it. It's almost like I'm gonna say I hate to say it comparing to the trades, but there has to be that component of you're getting an educational component, but there's that immersion, there's that hands-on skill that you're actually getting, and it's no one sitting in a classroom and just getting lectures and just getting information drained on you is not necessarily the way that you can train in a lot of areas
Yeah.
of healthcare, especially in ultrasound. If
Yeah.
you do not have a highly clinical based program, it is going to be very difficult for the success to come
Yeah.
without a significant length of time. And it's so in a sense, it's like the trades, because if you're learning plumbing, electricity, HVAC,
Hands on.
you're getting hands on, like you're getting your hands
Yep.
dirty, you're doing the
Yep.
job. That's
Yeah.
what we're trying to do. And that model, the classroom stuff isn't it,
Yeah.
I wish I'd have done something with the trades. Like I cannot say that if I had kids that were kind of in that mode, but there's a huge need for that. And just like there's a need for the immersion in the healthcare side, that we need sonographers
Mhm.
that are willing to get their hands in.
Yeah. Yeah, because as much as like something like what I'm doing, it can help, nothing will replace hands-on environment. Nothing.
Nope.
Absolutely
Nope.
not. You have to have that, which is why I actually recommend like for even for mine, don't come to my program if you don't have access to hands-on. You can do an online only portion, but this is not to teach you everything you need to go and release you out into the world to do echoes or pediatric echo or anything, because if you don't have that hands-on component and someone who's willing to teach you on a regular basis and mentor you, you will not be successful in
Nope.
any aspect of that. So,
100%. 100% could not
yeah,
agree more.
yeah, for sure. So, any other insights that you would recommend for maybe a student who's looking for an echo program and or even someone trying to put together an echo program? Both.
Yeah, for the students that are looking for an echo program, I would you have to find what you're willing to tolerate in terms of the level of difficulty, right? So everything that you're going to do is going to be hard. Everything that you're going to learn is going to be hard. It's just a matter of what you're willing to kind of tolerate. Um, you need to look at the accreditation status. That's another big advice piece that we give to people. Don't go to an unaccredited program because the uphill fight is going to be bad. And then if you go to some of these other programs that are on the smaller side, make sure that you have some kind of a identification with the professor who you're going to be working with and spending all this time, because with these more immersive programs, if you don't feel like there's a connection, it's going to be a lot harder. So you're almost, the big joke that Richie had with me was he didn't interview me for the program. I interviewed him. And you almost have to
Nothing
have
wrong
that
with that.
mentality. Nothing wrong with that. You
Yeah.
have to have that
Yep.
mentality. I would rather you interview me. And because essentially I am in somewhat of a service industry, in the sense that my goal is, once I decide that you're going to be somebody that I'm willing to work with, my job is going to be, I am 100% in, and you better be 100% in as well, because my job is going to be get you to the finish line. And I am 100% in, you better be the same way. So you have to make sure that there is that meeting of the minds in that sense. So from a student standpoint, check those boxes when you go in. Make sure that you've got the KHEP, make sure that you can identify and look at the class size. And then the clinical site. God dang, the clinical site.
Yeah.
Who do you use for your clinical sites? Are you just using kind of like figure out who your clinical sites are, or do you have, reputable labs and hospitals? Like, go to a hospital-based lab if you're going to learn how to do this. Don't, outpatient clinics, you will learn certain things, but there has to be the hospital-based component in there, because you're going to see a lot more. It's the exposure.
Yeah.
As
You
far
will
as starting,
never, yeah, we'll come back to that in one second, but you will never get what you need pathology wise or understanding of any type of just valvular issues, different cardiomyopathies. You will never get everything that you need to experience pathology wise in an outpatient center. It won't
no,
happen. Or
and then you'll
even in,
see the
I mean,
procedures.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Then you're looking at structural heart, right? So then there's all those components too, which has significantly just changed over the landscape there has changed just even in the last 2 to 3 years, let alone,
Yeah.
before that. So, I think that, yeah, like I can't also reiterate enough the same way that, your clinical sites are everything,
Mhm.
everything.
They are. It makes or
And
breaks the
yeah,
program every time.
yeah,
As good as
absolutely.
you are as a professor, you cannot overcome the deficits of what you don't get from the clinical side. No way.
Yeah.
So you have to almost go into that, and actually that transitions right over into what are the advice that I have for people that would want to start a program. If you
Right.
can't get good clinical sites, do not try to start.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
identify the clinical sites first. That is one of the first things that you have to do, and that was what we did. I did that with this program. I said, what clinical sites am I going to use, and how many of them am I going to have, and how is this going to work? Then I built everything from there, because that is arguably more than half of what your program is going to make. So you have to identify those first. That is probably the biggest piece of advice. And then secondly would be just figuring out where it fits within the organization or whatever that you work in. Make sure that you have people that are behind you. Make sure that you know exactly where the place is going to be within the organization. Because if there's not buy-in from the organization, it's dead in the water. If you don't have clinical sites, it's dead in the water. So once you figure those things out, if you have that, it'll happen organically and it'll work its way through. But you have to have clinical sites and the organizational backing, hands down.
Yeah. And the good part about a hospital-based program is you kind of have some built-in clinical sites, right? So you're not having to go out. One of my roles many, many years ago was a clinical liaison where I would go find clinical sites for an ultrasound school. So it can be difficult. I'm just saying. Yeah.
You would know then, if that was your
Yeah.
job, you know exactly what to
Uh-huh.
look for and what not to look for and what their
Oh, yeah.
obstacles are, for sure.
Yeah. It can be challenging if you don't have that built in. And then you have, I think that the kind of shift to having more hospital-based programs across the country
Mhm.
is also going to reduce clinical sites for some of the other schools. So you have this offset in availability. I mean, there's only so many people to have trained, right? Like there's only so
Mhm.
many sonographers that can actually be a preceptor and give that knowledge while they're scanning. And so you're not going to accept students from other locations as much if you are having a hospital-based program that you can then retain those students internally. And what does that
Yeah.
do to your local community college? Which I, yeah.
It
Yeah,
depends
we
on
don't
how
have to
big the
talk about it. It's
organization.
okay.
Yeah, that's a whole
Yeah,
other,
that's another animal we do not have to discuss, but but it's a reality,
sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
And the goal is to try to do as many things for as many people and to allow as many things as you can. But, like you said, there are limitations to what you have
Yeah.
from the good sites and the people that are able to do it. So yeah,
Yeah. Yep. And so I think that we will see a shift in that area across the country too as more hospital programs develop. So
I agree.
I'm interested to see how that plays out, but we'll keep an eye out for that one. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So back to kind of getting someone who wants to get a program off the ground, whether that be hospital based or whatever.
Mhm,
KHEP accreditation. So obviously the
mhm.
gold standard, that's something that you have to have. End of the story.
Yep.
However, you don't get that right away. So where are you
No.
at in that process that, obviously people take a risk on you at first if you're not. And you have to be able to have results and outcomes to get KHEP accreditation. So it's this kind of catch 22, right?
Yeah, so that is one of the biggest things that I had to build with trust. Was, hey, I'm telling people, hey, make sure you go to an accredited program, but I'm not
I'm
an
not
accredited
accredited.
program when I'm getting started. And but I was extremely transparent. Matter of fact, that was like one of the first things that I would say, like right after say, hi, my name is Daniel Bourque. By the way, we're not accredited. Like I would make sure that I got that out of the way to let them know that my number one priority was to get the accreditation process started right as soon as the classes were enrolled. So we started in August. I had my application submitted to KHEP to the JRC CVT in July. Like I had
Nice.
all the paperwork together. I had everything ready.
Yeah.
Um, I had all of the application filled out, and Jeff Hill was amazing help with that. I had really good people that were helping me kind of through that process. We got that submitted. It's a process, but the nice thing was
Hmm.
is that the state of Florida, a lot of the stuff that we had already done for the state of Florida aligned with what KHEB wanted. So that was also the good part. So a lot of the documents were done. We just had to kind of put them in the specific formats. We submitted in July. We had a site visit in November. And then right now, at this point, we're just kind of waiting. So the board is meeting. We're either going to be on the January docket, which will be, I think it's this week, or we'll be on the next cycle, which I think will be March. So we're just waiting for the announcement to see what they're going to say and what the recommendations were. I mean, they were pleased with what they saw. They were impressed that we had kind of done a lot of things early. So usually people don't do this early. I said, listen, I needed trust of people to follow through with this in order for them to come. They came, and that was the question that they kept asking me because people had
Yeah.
seen other people get burned from non-accredited
Hmm.
programs. I said, I will not do that to you. So it
Yeah.
was my mission, and hopefully we'll get it across the finish line. So we'll wait to see.
Yeah. And I think when you have the backing of an organization that's strong, like Orlando Health, that name carries that weight, right?
Yeah,
Same with like Cleveland Clinic, of course, for Amy. So, when you have that kind of backing standing behind you, I think people are willing to take the risk. I think where it
sure.
becomes challenging is for, little people like me trying to do stuff, things like that, because you don't have that reputation of an organization that's strong behind you.
Yeah,
So that can be challenging.
it is a challenge, and if you look at the way that healthcare systems have gone, right? What are the trends in healthcare? Is that the smaller organizations, the smaller clinics are being bought up by the bigger
Yep.
umbrellas, and it's hard to kind of operate in small and independent. Private practices are getting bought up. Clinics are being bought up. Schools are going to kind of follow in the same. If you don't have that protective umbrella of a community college, like you had said, or a hospital-based program, it's very difficult to operate independently on your own. It's much more of a challenge. So but then again, it's hard to walk into a hospital and say, "Hey, I want to start a program," without the
Right.
reputation part to go into it. So it's not an easy thing to do at all. I
Yeah.
I have to remind myself of that
Yeah.
it's that I'm lucky for where I've been able to fall and where my career has kind of taken me. But sometimes you make your luck, and you when you work with good people. So and decisions that you make will set you up for that.
For sure. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today. So we're getting close to time, and I just want to, for again, just thank you. I think having insight into kind of the everything that goes into creating an echo program is something that maybe students don't even realize, so it can't be taken lightly. And I think kind of being transparent about that and what that looks like helps them to understand the dedication that you have to their success, right? Because sometimes they probably don't quite grasp that. So having that transparency has been really nice to see.
Well, thank you. It's important because we don't see it as much in academia, and I think that's one of the things that the students were very surprised with when we got started. It's like, oh wait, you're not trying to trick us. There's no there's no gotcha questions or any of this kind of stuff. I said, no, my job is not to fail you. My job is to once you hear my job is
Yeah.
to get you through this. It's not going to be easy, but when you get you through it. So yeah,
Right.
it's different in that way, and that's what I love about it. So, but
Awesome.
thank you for
Sounds
having me. This
good.
has been fun.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed every minute of this. It's been great.
Absolutely. Great conversation. So I'm curious to see how your pass rate is.
So am I.
100%, right?
That's what I'm hoping.
100%.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yes.
That's what we're hoping.
So, yeah. Awesome. I'm confident it will be 100%. So awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate it. And this has been another episode of Sonographers After Dark. I'm Lara Williams with Daniel Bourque, and I will